Today, I invite you on a journey of reflection about a truth as profound as the universe itself. Imagine a man sitting under a fig tree, immersed in a silence that seemed to touch the essence of the world. This man, Siddhartha Gautama, later known as Buddha, renounced everything in search of the truth. Upon attaining enlightenment, he left us a timeless teaching. Suffering arises from attachment, and by freeing ourselves from it, we find peace. These words, though ancient, continue to echo in our modern society. Here on our channel, where we discuss spirituality and emotional healing, we seek to explore how profound teachings like Buddha's can help us deal with internal challenges and the pains of everyday life. What makes this lesson so impactful? Is it merely a spiritual concept, or does it also connect with what contemporary science reveals about how the human mind works? Recent studies in psychology and neuroscience demonstrate that Buddha's wisdom transcends the metaphysical, finding support in how our brains process desire, impermanence, and suffering. In this text, we will explore how this teaching can transform lives. We will see how it applies to the stories of iconic figures, to our hectic daily lives, and to scientific discoveries that explain why we become attached and how we can overcome it. More than just a philosophy, this lesson offers us a key to understanding life and finding genuine balance. In Buddhism, compassion is an essential practice for relieving suffering, both one's own and that of others. Neuroscience has discovered that acts of compassion and kindness activate the brain's reward centers, releasing endorphins and oxytocin, known as the happiness hormones. The practice of compassion also strengthens social connections and improves overall well-being, creating a cycle of benefits for both the giver and the receiver. Buddha's lesson on attachment and suffering resonates through stories across history and literature, revealing the depth of its relevance. A remarkable example is King Ashoka, one of the greatest rulers of ancient India. Despite his conquests and wealth, Ashoka felt an emptiness that no victory could fill. After encountering a Buddhist monk, he began to reflect on his actions and realized that attachment to power and conquests was the true source of his anguish, and no external outcome could truly fill that void. Inspired by this discovery, he abandoned war and dedicated his life to compassion and wisdom, showing how detachment can bring peace and purpose. Modern psychology offers a fascinating perspective on why we become attached to things, people, and ideas, linking this behavior to our evolutionary roots and our quest for emotional security. Our need for attachment is rooted in survival mechanisms that ensured the preservation of the human species over millennia, but that, in the contemporary world, often trap us in cycles of suffering. From an evolutionary standpoint, attachment was essential to ensure that our ancestors remained connected to social groups, which were vital for protection, food, and survival. In childhood, attachment theory, developed by John Bowlby, highlights how babies form deep emotional bonds with their caregivers as an adaptive response. These bonds provide security in a world full of uncertainties and risks. However, as we grow, this need for emotional security remains, manifesting in more complex forms such as the pursuit of stability in relationships, social status, or even material possessions. In psychology, emotions like fear, anxiety, and desire are deeply linked to attachment. When we encounter situations that threaten our stability, such as unexpected changes, losses, or rejections, our emotional system goes on high alert. This reaction, rooted in the survival instinct, seeks to protect what we consider vital. For example, attachment to an idea of success can be an attempt to avoid feelings of failure or rejection. However, modern psychology also recognizes that this dynamic can turn into a cycle of suffering. When we attach ourselves to external outcomes as a source of validation or happiness, we become trapped in the illusion that something or someone outside of us can fill our internal void. This behavior is linked to how the human brain functions. The reward system, governed by dopamine, motivates us to seek pleasure and avoid pain. Yet, it often leaves us dissatisfied because the pleasure generated by external achievements is transient. Looking inward, as suggested by both modern psychology and Buddha's teachings, we can begin to interrupt this cycle. The practice of introspection and emotional awareness helps us understand patterns of attachment and the origins of our reactions. Techniques such as meditation, widely studied by neuroscience, have shown effectiveness in calming the mind and reducing activity in the amygdala, the brain region associated with fear and anxiety. This practice allows us to observe our desires and fears without fully identifying with them, creating space for more conscious choices. The process of looking within is, in fact, a journey to unravel the narrative we create about what we need to feel secure and complete. It invites us to explore our emotions, values, and the patterns we have built throughout our lives. When we recognize that much of our suffering is linked to resistance to impermanence or excessive attachment, we can begin to replace these patterns with a broader acceptance of reality. The key to overcoming attachment lies in looking inward and embracing the emotions that fuel it, understanding that suffering arises from the attempt to control what is outside of us. By recognizing that true happiness comes from within, we learn to value the present without clinging to it. This understanding is strengthened by the awareness of impermanence. Everything, whether good or bad, is in constant change. When we accept this transient nature of life, we free ourselves from the fear of loss and insatiable desire, finding peace in the natural flow of existence. No matter how much we try to organize our lives, we are constantly challenged by unexpected changes that expose our vulnerability and remind us of impermanence. Buddha's true lesson is not to eliminate desire completely, but to understand its origin, its impermanent nature, and how it contributes to human suffering. In Buddhism, desire, tanha, is identified as one of the causes of suffering in the second noble truth. However, the goal is not simply to extinguish all desires, but to transform our relationship with them. The central problem is not desire itself, but excessive attachment to outcomes or the inability to accept that all things are transient. When we understand the impermanent nature of desires and life, we learn not to cling to pleasure or resist pain. This allows us to live with greater serenity and balance without becoming trapped in the cycle of dissatisfaction that attachment can generate. Contemporary scientific studies corroborate these stories and observations. Researchers at Princeton found that the pleasure of achieving something we desire is quickly replaced by new longings, creating an endless cycle of dissatisfaction. This shows that suffering arises not only from lack, but also from excess, when we cling to the idea that something external will finally complete us. Buddha's wisdom about attachment and impermanence is not just a spiritual view, but also a truth supported by scientific and philosophical discoveries. Modern neuroscience shows us that our brains are biologically programmed to seek pleasure and avoid suffering. The reward system, governed by dopamine, motivates us to pursue desires. However, this same mechanism traps us in an incessant cycle, because the pleasure of achievement is always temporary. Research from the University of Cambridge highlights that this constant pursuit, rather than bringing lasting satisfaction, leaves us vulnerable to suffering. When we redirect this pursuit of external pleasure toward finding internal satisfaction, we begin to break the cycle of suffering and find more lasting peace. Psychology also offers important insights. John Bowlby's attachment theory explains that, from an early age, We form emotional bonds that provide us with security, but also make us resistant to change. Studies show that the human brain, in trying to avoid uncertainty, creates narratives that give us a false sense of control. When these narratives are challenged, whether by sudden changes or inevitable losses, we face frustrations and suffering. This reveals that resistance to impermanence is deeply rooted in our psychological structure. Modern practices, such as meditation, offer tools for dealing with these difficulties. Researchers at Harvard University discovered that regular meditation not only reduces stress, but also changes how the brain handles emotions and change. It reduces activity in the amygdala, responsible for emotional responses such as fear and anxiety, while strengthening the prefrontal cortex, which regulates our decisions and emotions. It can even slow brain aging by up to 7 years. These changes help us accept impermanence and face suffering with resilience. Moreover, contemporary movements such as minimalism echo Buddha's lesson by promoting detachment from material and emotional excess. In literature, characters like Santiago from Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea and Levin from Tolstoy's Anna Karenina exemplify how accepting life as it is, with its losses and uncertainties, can lead to true inner peace. Finally, Buddha's teaching on impermanence transcends time and cultures, even being confirmed by modern physics. Research in quantum physics shows that the universe is a field of possibilities in constant flux, reinforcing that stability is an illusion. This understanding challenges us to let go of the need for control and to live in the present moment. If this reflection resonated with you, beloved beings of light, share your thoughts, leave your comment, and help us spread this message. Every interaction you make is a step toward more people discovering the beauty and depth of living with lightness and purpose. We are counting on you.